Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar entitled How Technology Can Enhance Employee Experience and HR Service Delivery. So my name is Peter Banks and I'm the founder and MD of the HR Director publication. We are a strategic resource for senior HR and people leaders in print, person and online. Delighted today to partner with HumanForce, a workforce management specialist. Right, a little bit of an overview from me though. So let's just look at this topic. So when it comes to HR and workforce management technology, shift-based or deskless workers have traditionally been neglected, and both management of these workers and their experiences at work has suffered. However, COVID-19 demonstrated the critical role that many of these workers play in the smooth running of society. So as a result of a digital revolution is well underway in industries such as healthcare, retail, hospitality, and manufacturing. New digital tools and mobile apps are transforming critical areas such as onboarding, time and attendance, rotas and scheduling, learning, development, and more. So the result is a richer employee experience for deskless workers and significant productivity gains for the organizations that employ them, which has all got to be good. So let's introduce our panel. Joining me today is firstly Nicola Jackson. Nicola is the HR business partner at ASM Global. So hi, Nicola.
Hi there.
Thanks for joining us. And also Nathan Miller. Nathan is the managing director for the UK at HumanForce. So good afternoon, Nathan.
Yeah, nice to see you, Peter. Nice to see you, Nicola.
Good. Thank you both for taking part today. Always a pleasure. So let's find out a little bit more about you both, if I may. So Nicola, may I start with you? A little bit about you, your role, your organisation, and I think a number of employees would be useful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Nicola Jackson. I'm a HR business partner at ASM Global. So I've been with the business coming up to 2 years now. So joined just as the business was reinflating from COVID. And as a company, we're a world-leading events and entertainment venue operator. So throughout the whole of COVID, we had a complete blackout period for 2 years. So that reinflation period was a really manic and crazy time, as a lot of people would have done in the hospitality sector, particularly as it was one of the hardest hit through COVID. But to give you an idea in terms of our size and scale, we're a global business, but the UK sits as part of the European entity. So Europe constitutes 10 venues in the UK, and when I say venues, I'm talking concert venues. So you may know the AO Arena in Manchester, OVO Arena Wembley, Olympia London, one of our iconic venues, and exhibition centres. But we also have a catering services side of our business where we've got another 12, 13 venues. So York Racecourse, Ripon Racecourse, as an example. Yeah, it's been quite an exciting 2 years. A lot of my background has been largely in the retail hospitality sector, so didn't join completely green. But when I did join, we'd not long actually signed an agreement with HumanForce, which we'll be obviously talking quite a lot about today.
Lovely, thanks, Nicola. And yeah, some change you've gone through there, as many of us have. So Nathan, back to you. So a brief bio from you, please.
Yes, thanks, Peter. And Nicola, not an enviable 2 years to come through. So I have the luxury of looking after the UK and Europe for HumanForce. We are a global workforce management solution provider. Quite simply, we try and get the right people with the right skill set to the right place at the right time and paid correctly. So all of the aspects that encompasses, and we are globally privileged to work across multiple sectors, but specifically to Nicola's sector, we have a large client base that is really enjoyable to work with because it's across those venues, stadiums and arenas that get to host some of the world's most iconic events, be that a tennis tournament of a grand sort of championship style right the way through to these music events, venues and sports stadia. And that's the bit I genuinely love because it's been part of my background for the last 15 years of my working life. So yeah, lots of industry-based experience to bring to that technology for, but great client base, great flexible workforces, and a big demand.
Terrific. Thanks, Nicola. Thanks, Nathan. I think the point is about experiences, isn't it? What Nicola you're delivering is experiences, which is what we've all learned from the last 2 or 3 years, which we've missed. So first question, Nicola, if I come to you first then. So Could you, obviously you talked about the size of the workforce there, but could you tell us how many of your employees are sort of shift-based deskless workers? I guess some idea of what level of HR workforce management tech you've had, well, I guess what you've got available now, and this has been something you've obviously been improving on. So yeah, why was that recognised as a requirement?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got around 500 permanent staff across the UK, but one of the reasons why the workforce tech is so important is actually for our casual population. So as an event-driven business, we have circa 3,000 event-driven staff that we work for us, and that's from Aberdeen furthest north in Scotland all the way down to London in Wembley. So trying to get the engagement and drive that engagement across that casual population, particularly as we've already talked about, hospitality being one of the hardest hit industries throughout COVID. Unfortunately, that industry has lost a lot of people because they've gone to other industries where they can achieve a better work-life balance. Because, whilst events, entertainment is super exciting, we're creating experiences and memories for people, it is also often unsociable hours. And they've found work elsewhere in industries where actually they have been treated a little better than the hospitality industry had. So that engagement piece is super important. And a large part of our population is also that millennial population. And they live and breathe a lot of their normal daily lives through social media, through app-based technology. So for ASM Global to start looking at how we can partner with a workforce tech provider that can provide that wireless mobile technology for our casual population to register for shifts, update their availability, check in and out by either geofencing or through a vein registration. It seemed like a really easy win in starting that engagement journey. It doesn't start and end with workforce technology in a system such as HumanForce, for example, but it's a great starting point, and other aspects that we're looking at are e-learning platforms as well to support that journey.
Yeah. So, and I think, yeah, that's a very good point, isn't it? As you say, when COVID happened, lots of people kind of couldn't work, were furloughed or whatever, and they were also. So you've got that whole engagement piece is absolutely critical in terms of hearts and minds, isn't it? So Nathan, just is that typical of what you're seeing, I guess, across the board with your clients? And just give us a flavour of, it's obviously a big part of the workforce for many companies, isn't it? Was it 80% of the workforce has been deskless, do you think? Give us a flavour.
Yeah, so that's an interesting statistic. We'll come on to that because that's a global reference to 2.7 billion people that work in an environment that is deskless by nature. Now, if you look at the sectors that covers, the preeminent sector for deskless work is agriculture, but straight away after that you're into education, healthcare, retail and hospitality, pretty much in that order. So 2.7 represents a deskless workforce globally. If we start to hone in on what does that mean in the United Kingdom, and we look at hotels and restaurant or food businesses, you've got a number of about 4.8 million workers in that space, which will be dominantly deskless. And if you look at the gig economy records of the last 12 months, it identifies about 7.5 million people, so roughly 10% of the UK population. Now let's talk deskless means and gig, two terms there. Deskless means people that work in an environment that's not within a static desk environment, so retail, standing up, food service. But the gig economy workers encompasses an element of those people who take either single or multiple work through platforms. Now, HumanForce is a workforce management solution that's employer-led as opposed to an open platform. But what's interesting is the behaviour of these people is they're becoming more used to using technology to access work. And that's where Nicola's engagement piece is so critical, because they're used to having mobile phone, app-based first point of contact in order to gain shifts, take work, accept work, see pay slips. So it's definitely becoming a mobile first. But you mentioned that the engagement piece. I think what's interesting is of that 2.7 billion, we can't look at that necessarily, but some recent surveys done by workforce providers show that 64% of employees in the UK market specifically still receive work offers through text message, iMessage or direct phone call. So when you can deploy a platform, you can get a quicker, or a workforce management solution like HumanForce, you can get a whole of company notification process up and running really quickly. you can also get one-to-one communication, which is that starting point for engagement in work. But coming right the way back to your point that Nicola made, and you mentioned, Peter, is go back to 2019, and we started to see that stock market of staff that Nicola mentions, where they could trade themselves off using technology to try and get the best bang for their buck on their available working hours. And that has created a massive pinch in the hospitality industry. So engagement and access to learning, access to work in a flexible way is one of the tools companies like Nicola's are deploying with HumanForce to engage that workforce and get them out working efficiently.
Yeah, I think funny enough, just chucking this in, but my daughter actually did a bit of work with kind of events, actually, Nicola, probably mainly for your company, but the app part, which I probably may have been Nathan's, you know, the app part in terms of availability, getting shifts, that sort of thing, really slick, really slick. I was really impressed by that. So you can see already how that can work for them. Let's move on to our second question then. Nathan, let me come to you for this one. So, you know, is there, I guess, let's call it a tipping point. Is there a tipping point where sort of employers, reach where they realise they cannot continue with let's say more manual, error-prone processes? Is that be fair to say?
I think Nicola will smile. The tipping point comes from both sides of the equation. I think a tipping point might be, what can I do differently to attract, retain, engage, and work with my teams? And platforms like ours offer a channel of communication and method to do that. There's the tipping point of commercial benefit, because there are some well-documented return on investment from the efficiency that capturing timesheets electronically, offering rosters electronically, allowing people to accept, reject, and swap shifts electronically, and outputting to payroll electronically can give a business. So there's a financial company tipping point metric of return on investment, but there's also the engagement and communication piece. And where HumanForce is applying focus is to the benefit of these deskless, mobile, and transient workers, because we think not only are we trying to solve the company challenge, we're solving the worker requirement, which will in turn also inform and influence the business, because we're in a very different world to just getting organisations who want to time clock people in an electronic work. This is much more about employee value proposition, benefit to the worker, to encourage them to want to be with that organisation. Cultural alignment. These are critical demands of the workforce that we didn't have, I don't think, 8 to 10 years ago in my memory.
Nicola, I know obviously you joined, and I know HumanForce were involved already at that point. So the organisation must have kind of recognised certain triggers that were happening to show you that change was needed. Is that right? And I guess, do you know when you came in, what sort of things were you looking to fix, and what was missing, I guess, from the tech systems and processes that you had in place at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. When you think of a business like ours with, just in the UK, 22 venues, from Aberdeen down to London, that's quite a large geographical spread. And with a centralised corporate team that provides support to all of those venues individually, we'll all sit here and know we try our very best to try and drive as much consistency in a variety of different things, whether it's, how you complete a particular process, how we engage with our workforce. But that becomes really difficult to control from a centralized function without having technology such as HumanForce that helps that standardization in terms of process, but also having the confidence that our casual workforce are getting the same engagement company-wide. Because before you know it, you've got venues communicating with casuals via out-of-date email distribution lists. We've got individuals who may get missed off a bi-weekly payroll cut-off point, and then before you know it, we're processing out-of-cycle payments, which obviously comes at an additional cost to a business as well. You've got populations that have visa restrictions, which means they may be able to work 20 hours a week. And having a system such as HumanForce allows us to have automated rules within the system. So if someone does have those restrictions, it prevents a venue or a manager from scheduling someone that would take them over those restrictions. And it also is really intelligent in the fact that it can you can put forward dates in for things such as that, so that out of term time, in term time, where you have those fluctuations, you can put all the information in there and it does the thinking for you. So as a manager and as an operator, you can have confidence that the venue's going to, that the system's going to tell you when you can't do that any longer, and actually look for somebody else or for alternative staff to support you in those events. So there's a number of things that by default, in terms of the manual processes that we've been working towards historically, will be supported and improved. But it also gives us confidence as a business that our casual workforce are being engaged in the right way, they're getting the right method of communication across the board.
Yeah. And that whole casual workforce is really vital to you, isn't it? Because it's sort of, we're in these kind of agile times where peaks and troughs in terms of your workforce requirements. So I can see how that kind of real-time data and communication piece is really important. So yeah, okay. Listen, while we're at this point, any questions from anyone, please do pop them on. There's a Q&A, so just pop them on there. We will ask them as we go. If I'm not kind of asking what you'd like to know, if there's anything burning, please do, and I'll put it to the panel. Let's just run our first poll, a couple of polls today, pretty straightforward. So this will pop up on your screen in a moment. So this one is, firstly, will you be implementing new workforce management or HR tech solutions in 2023? Any thoughts on, Nathan, any thoughts on what would be top here? You've got two answers. You've got to get this one right, surely.
Well, my hope, Peter, is obviously going to be yes, and we'd love to talk to you. So if they're implementing a workforce management solution or HR technology, we'd love to hear about it. So let's hope there's definitely some out there. It'd be interesting to see the answer.
Nicola, do you want to just chuck your thoughts in there?
Yeah, I think, you know, from a HR perspective, understanding, depending upon what industry you work in, you know, what that journey's been like from reinflating from COVID, I'd probably sit in the not sure, because investing in technology and the effort, the time, the consideration that needs to go into implementing that correctly may not necessarily be the right time, dependent upon where businesses are on that inflation journey now post-COVID.
Okay. Well, I've got some answers. Sorry, go on, Nathan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Nick, that's a really good point. I think one of the best bits of advice we give when we engage with clients that are looking at their strategy for technology implementation, and bearing in mind it does sit from an HR leadership survey I read recently as one of the #1 investment focus areas for the next 12 to 24 months. But they need to consider what the benefits are to the wider organisation, look at the existing processes that they've got that drain time, workforce management, payroll process, what resources that's going to reduce, or budget control that they've got. So that, as you rightly say, there's a lot of pre-work that needs to go into that implementation review.
Okay. Well, let's have a look. So answers in. So yeah, 57% yes. So are looking to implement a workforce management solution. 29% no, and there was a not sure, 14%. So we're doing the right thing. We're in the right place. Everyone's in the right place today, which is great. So let's just, without dwelling on that, it's pretty straightforward. So Nicola, let's have a look at I guess the needs of your deskless workers. So if, you know, this, again, incredible times we've lived in the last 3-4 years. So what do they expect now? What do they expect from their kind of HR, WFM sort of, you know, workforce management technology to deliver? What are they looking for as employees?
It's a really interesting one, because if you think about how technology enabled all of us, you know, through COVID and coming out of COVID, whether it was ordering meals and drinks via an app-based system, you know, when you're socializing outside of a workplace, we've kind of got used to this instant level of service, and, you know, whether it's waiter service or any other areas that technology has been applied. And I think it's very applicable to the workplace as well, actually. And again, you know, very industry related in the fact that a lot of our population are that millennial generation, as we've already spoken about. So technology is just a natural extension to how they use technology, you know, in their everyday lives, you know, in using social media and apps and so on. So making work more accessible, easier for people to gain access to, makes sense. You can, based on an individual's availability, they can in essence pick and choose when they want to work outside of that core availability by shift bidding. So if one week you've got a lot going on socially and actually work-life balance, you know, you want to choose the life side of things, great. The week after, you might want some quick cash and actually there might be a couple of shifts that you want to bid for that will help support you on a weekend away, or to buy someone's birthday present, for example, that's coming up in the coming weeks. So it does provide a greater visibility of flexibility, and I think that's really important. But then from a business perspective, this provides a whole host of data that we would never have ordinarily had, which can help drive further decisions around casual engagement. And I think most people can probably speak for themselves who are attending this call today, that the importance of data-driven decisions is so high these days. We're starting to get used to being able to forecast on an event by event basis. It helps us to understand what proportion of our cost is direct labour versus potentially agency labour, and what can we do to tip those balance of costs in a different direction. So we're also getting used to having new data that's helping to shape how we can further support that workforce.
Yeah. And Nathan, we've got a question coming in actually. I'll do this in a minute, but I'll just come to you firstly, Nathan. So again, tech's constantly developing, and I guess we could look at the future is, who knows, isn't it? So what sort of things are on the horizon for, what can we expect for tech in terms of helping employees and customers?
Yeah, well, I think people like Nicola are critical in our answering of that question as a technology provider, because it's talking to people like Nicola. I've got a session actually catching up with Nicola in their business at the end of this week, where we're going to be asking that exact question. What do we think that future landscape looks like for them, so that we make sure we're on the right track? We have to be thinking several years out in our roadmap development. So I can answer that question probably to the 2-year horizon, and I expect to see demands of our business be based around integration. How can I offer as much automatic process of the data that these organizations manage across all of their current or yet to be embedded IT solutions, technology solutions? So how do I help Nicola attract, train, recruit someone, and have as little touch point to the record keeping, so that that data record can flow through to the HR centralized platform, into the workforce management, allow that person to be deployed, get them to be paid correctly in payroll, and even go down the route of offering them early earned wage access and some financial advice in the way that they can save. So we're really trying to streamline that entire journey. And the answer to that from our side will either be feature development, technology growth, or integration to ecosystem partners. And I do see the marketplace driving towards just really efficient, client-focused access to their data.
I think you touched on it there, but tech is so much more than just, like you say, rosters, and it could have managed that quite easily. Now it's gone beyond that in terms of other areas, key areas of HR that we need to be across, like employee experience and engagement.
Well, yeah, just on that point, there's a really interesting statistic in one of the bits of work I read recently. You need to check if it was from a host of sort of 3 or 4 pieces of data analysis I was reading. I can't quite recall, but the statistic remained with me, that 62% of the people surveyed indicated they had no access to development resource or training as a flexible or mobile worker. So that, just take that as one example of an area to focus on, so that there's that real parity across your full-time and maybe more office-based employee group, and that you've got in your deskless workforce to get access to that personal development. That's critical. I definitely see that being a very integrated focus point. And then the financial well-being is becoming a real hot topic in the last 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, good. Let's turn to this question, and so thank you for this one. Nicola, this was to you really. So how much real-time data are you using, and how are you segregating the different locations or events? And on sort of going into that, really just added a little bit here, and do you use AI to help sort this massive data?
So we're still on our journey, if I'm completely honest with you, around how we're adopting that data and how that's influencing our decision making. So to give you an idea as to where we are on our journey, as I say, we've got 10 venues in the UK. We are fully launched in 1 venue. We are soon to be launched in 2 further venues, one of those being our catering services business. So within that, they have 13 different venues within that business. So just to put that into context, in real terms, it's around 14 venues that we're live or soon to be live in. And every time we are scheduling staff for events, and it depends upon the peaks and troughs of the industry, because the racecourse industry doesn't really kick off until the end of this month, start of April, and we'll start to see a huge amount of data that's being driven now that they're set up and ready to go live up until the end of September, October. And then you've got the venue side of things, where we've had a quiet period over Christmas, January, and we're soon to ramp up now in March until June. July it starts to dip off, August very quiet, and then again starts to ramp up in September. So in some of those areas, and as a result of COVID, we've not really had a full 12 months of data to work with, so we're still feeling through that. But a lot of it is based around the scheduling, and feel free to dip in from a technical perspective, Nathan, on the system if you feel you need to. But we schedule our staff on an event by event basis. We then get an event P&L essentially that tells us how much it has cost us to staff a specific event. That automatically gives us a great benchmark to work from for future years in understanding, okay, we had a 50-50 split in terms of direct labour versus agency labour. What can we do to try and make that 75 direct labour and 25% agency labour? Because obviously you're paying a margin. So what can we do to try and drive some cost benefit there? And we used 300 staff to staff that event. And actually we noticed we were probably 20 over what we needed to be. So how can we think more intelligently around the numbers that we need to staff every event? And, you know, don't get me wrong, there's a fine balancing act between, you know, being too lean and affecting the operation, but then being kind of overstaffed to a fact that actually you've got more people than you physically need to operate. So we're still going through that journey is the long and short answer of that. But hopefully that provides you with a little bit of context in terms of where we are, why we are where we are, but ultimately how we're seeing that data helping to drive decisions in the future.
Yeah, that's really good. And Nathan, I'll come to you quickly because that point is when that builds, doesn't it? When that builds and you've rolled that out across all the events, matching the data you're going to have to work from then. And Nathan, yeah, just coming to you just to...
Yeah, so do me a huge favour, Peter, and just remind me if the question had some quite specific data breakdowns, and I just want to try and go back and answer that.
I just cleared the question. It was more about looking at all the different events, venues, and actually do you use AI to do it? Do you segment the data? It was really a long
good. So my notes were okay. So I had it down to sort of an event venue breakdown. Was there any AI? So the answer from a HumanForce perspective that I can give you with our current client base is start from the basis that if we're capturing the data from a time and attendance, we operate with a location, department, and area role structure in the system. So if we're capturing that data, the answer is we should be able to, either from a suite of existing reports or from building a report dashboard, be able to report against the data that's in the system. The use of AI is slightly young in the sense of demand-based rostering, because you want to make sure that the data you're pulling into or exporting from any system is accurate. And that's where we know some of our clients have had challenges, because they manage the external data that we're not in control of outside of HumanForce. So to answer the question for the person that posed it, there are mechanisms, whether it's Power BI or Azure Data Lakes or others, there are other service providers that will allow you to aggregate data from multiple endpoints to multiple locations, to mash it all together and try and get yourself your own meaningful set of criteria. And at HumanForce, we actually do work with a partner who can look at doing that for some of our clients where there's multiple points outside of HumanForce they want to look at. But as long as the data exists within HumanForce, we can report on that side of it, and that's in real time, as Nicola said, for event-based and costs. But principally, as an organisation, once you've established what you want the data to tell you, there are businesses alongside our own that you can work with to get that in a really good and meaningful way. And the answer on AI is I see it only continuing to develop the use of the AI technology just to speed up the processing of the data so it becomes useful, because reporting for reporting's sake creates loads of paperwork for people to look at. Finding the right metrics for your business that drive an action, for me, is always the right way forward. And that normally comes from some quite simplistic thinking around what are we going to take and use. So if the data's there, you can get access to it.
And if you've got something really, if there's a real specific area question on that question, by the way, Jose, who asked that, just ask us directly. If there's something you really want to kind of get to the bottom of, then we can certainly put that to the panel or afterwards. So please do. Nathan, coming back actually. Oh, here we go. Actually, it's so further on. Here we go. Actually, it was about selecting people and locations for events. I was thinking about. So I guess selecting people and locations for events. So I guess that's selecting employees, I guess, isn't it?
Well, so maybe the answer to that question comes around, and Nicola can jump in, please, at any point. But within a solution like ours, you apply skills to the individual worker. You can attach them to locations in which they can work. So the skills will attach to the role type that they might do. You heard Nicola mention visa controls. That's a rule that controls the number of hours they can work. So once that person has those rules applied to their capacity to take work, when you offer those roster opportunities, those rules take effect, and it'll roster offer to the pool of people whose skills, opportunities, location, and visa restrictions all enable them to be capable to work. So someone who's under 18 would not be a primary choice to potentially work as a principal bar person, because they might not have their licensing qualification without partnering with someone who does, as an example. So to answer your question, you can help in a system like ours define the rule structure that controls the allocation of resource to locations, to departments, to roles that they need to deliver.
Brilliant.
Does that hopefully answer that question?
I was just going to add to that, actually. If you're talking geographical locations, not just in terms of placement within a function, we have pools set up. So where we have venues, so we've got 2 venues in Manchester, for example, we've got Bridgewater Hall, we've got the AO Arena in Manchester. We can set up pools that allow a pool of individuals to work between either venue. So they can essentially be scheduled for shifts at either venue. So it allows us that flexibility. And the same with our catering business, you know, they've got a large population in Yorkshire, but actually that actually expands their potential talent pool for, you know, our venue in Leeds to tap into them and vice versa. But having that predefined criteria that Nathan's just talking about makes it easy. So the operator doesn't then need to think about, oh, but what about that visa restriction? And what about working time regulations? Because the rules have already been predefined and set. What about breaks? Again, it's already been predefined and set within the system. So they can have complete confidence that if they are having somebody that's working in their venue that ordinarily is based somewhere else, they know exactly what the system does, they know what's expected of them, where they turn up, where they check in, where they check out. And as a manager, they know they're going to get the same data.
I mean, that's just fantastic, isn't it? I mean, the time that would take manually to do, you know, the inaccuracy of that, so that's so really powerful stuff, how that can be used. All right.
Yeah, and just sorry, Peter, just to say, and the legal business risk that it helps you put some management against, because that compliance piece can be massively damaging to organisations when it gets missed. So just on the visa point, there are alerts within the solution that flag up that person's nearing the end of a visa period, so that can be rectified, rather than the alternative happen, which can be more damaging to the employee's experience as well as to the organisation.
Yeah, great. Let's move on to our next question then. So, you know, part of the title of this webinar is got the term employee experience in, which is a key term, and quite rightly so at the moment, because it's so imperative, isn't it, in terms of retention and attraction and, you know, keeping your staff. So, Nathan, can you outline some elements of employee experience that you feel can be transformed by HR workforce management tech?
Yeah, I can. There's one that really sticks to my mind, which is probably the most important thing for most people that go to work in this environment, is they do it in a less charitable way, but hopefully to get paid. So having visibility of pay slips before the payday pay run does reduce 2 things. One is hopefully the payroll errors, and secondly, the anxiety of the flexible worker around what they're actually going to be paid. And it so often gets called out as a wellness factor for individuals in a flexible workforce environment, rather than having to retrospectively scrabble to get these corrections made. It might be that in a real life example, I've worked 3 hours extra for Nicola a lovely ASM venue, and that's been authorised, so I can see in my timesheet my overtime's being paid, and I know that payment's coming through, rather than a horror show alternative that I'm underpaid or I've missed a payroll cut-off. So that anxiety reduction is a massive employee experience benefit that we get. The second biggest, to my mind, is open access to the shift opportunity. So just compare to a Excel-based spreadsheet owned by a people ops controller who might offer the shifts to their 15 best friends first. We don't want to think that it happens in a fair environment, but it might. In an open offer based on skills, availability, and rules within the system, that whole resource pool of people will be offered on a first come, first served response basis simultaneously. So transparency of the job opportunity removes that feeling of preferential treatment. And that again is a wellness factor for the employee value proposition. Add to that in-app communication, which gets called out as critical for both notifications, that's one-to-many, sending an organizational message out that actually the event's 15 minutes behind, or please check in at a different point. But then there's the in-app communication between individuals, managers to people, or colleague to colleague. I might want to say, hey, Peter, we work really well in the bar together. Are you on that shift on Saturday? So that's been positive. And then last but not least, the very fact that you can administer all of this in your own time flexibly while on the move are key functions that these individuals need because of the way they manage their lives in a very transient and flexible way. And very often the reason they've taken that job style in the first place.
Yeah, terrific. And Nicola, I know it's early days, I know that, but so have you seen any kind of, is there any examples of real improvement you've seen with employee experience from, you know, the tech that you've put in place so far? And you know, I guess, can you measure that? Are you measuring that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's twofold really, because we have the casual workforce, which ultimately we want to drive engagement and ultimately you know, improve retention around. But then you've also got the employees that are actually changing the way they work from these manual archaic systems of work to something that's much more sophisticated in style. So, you know, to echo Nathan's point, one of the main things that our casuals love is being able to see their pay slips. So if there are any errors, they can deal with them straight away. And it does remove a lot of the anxiety as to, is my pay going to be correct this week or not? But our staff that are actually doing the scheduling, so the scheduling teams, love the fact that it's all automated. They can populate schedules in advance. You can copy schedules for regular events, so it takes a lot of the manual onerous elements of rotas and scheduling out of the equation, but it also allows them to forward plan. So if they've sent shifts out and published shifts on an equal and fair basis, which is obviously something that we promote heavily, then if they can see it's 50% staffed, they can start thinking already, okay, who else can we go to? Who else is qualified to perform that role in that venue? Or do we need to look at other venues perhaps to get some help before we go to an agency, for example, where obviously staff come at a higher margin? Clocking in times are far easier as a clocking out time. So actually your staff can spend more time getting set up, ready for the shift, attending staff briefings so they're fully prepared. It really is twofold so far in terms of, you know, your permanent employees that are supporting this and changing the way they work day to day, in addition to some of the feedback we've had from our casual teams as well.
Yeah, Nicola, I had a question. Sorry, Peter, I had a question for Nicola on that, which we're hearing from a number of our other clients, and this might be relevant to you, that one of the key value propositions coming back from the working pool is educating the employer, or the opportunity to work offers being scheduled in a way that they're also not being bombarded by messaging. So that was a really big feedback, was to say, actually, you can start to look at when most shifts are accepted and target your shift offer within a close proximity to when they were being looked at and scheduled, or people have surveyed their pool of teams to say, when would you most like us to send out the following week or 2 weeks availability for you to respond to? Is that something that you've had any feedback on?
Yeah, so we find that when we are publishing shifts, that actually a Thursday seems to be a very receptive day. Sorry, it's gone really dark here, so apologies, I'm not doing the YMCA. So yeah, Thursdays tend to be a really good day for publishing shifts. It actually gets a really good uptake in terms of accepting those shifts over the course of the weekend. And again, I think that's largely to do with our millennial population, really balancing work with studies and so on and so forth. But it is a really fine balance. It's a good point, and it's something that I anticipate will have further conversations and probably some bumps in the road in around comms, because whilst it provides us with a really, really good platform, it is really important that it's engaging communication. It doesn't turn into spam, because quite quickly our workforce will become disengaged, and that's not what we want to do. Getting embodied and registered on the mobile app technology early doors is so key. What we don't want to do is then ruin all that hard work in getting that engagement to then end up being deemed as spam communication. So it's a real fine balance, and something that I do think we'll probably have to think more clearly about as we roll out to other venues.
That answers your question okay, Nathan?
Yeah, always helpful to hear from Nicola.
and I think it's a good one. And also, I guess with your kind of casual workers, I guess over time you're going to see, kind of talk about employee experience, you're going to see the amount of people coming for shifts and the number and the increases and decreases. You're going to kind of get a flavour of that as they use the tech and like the tech and have the self-service. And I think you're going to get that over time, aren't you? You're going to get some great data, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, this allows us to then support that engagement journey with other elements, such as e-learning and investing in this workforce, which actually historically they've not had, or if they have, it's certainly not been, at the forefront of people's minds. And again, I think that's one of the byproducts of COVID, in that actually this is such a valuable workforce to a lot of businesses. And you were asking earlier around what is it that people want, from tech. It's not just tech, but I think it's also a shift in the relationship in terms of businesses.
Yeah.
Whether you're, as a casual worker, you're wanting more from the businesses that you're working from. And I think this is a great first step to then adding other things such as e-learning platforms that helps them to get something from that relationship as well.
Yeah, I think just to add to the end of that, if you're an organisation that has not sat and defined, and you're looking at us talking today and you're thinking about technology, the first step is go and define the employee value proposition that you want to stand behind. And the reason I say that is, to go to Nicola's point, I think as an industry, generally, the hospitality and flexible workforce sectors were the slowest to react to the immediate onslaught of the pandemic and the engagement and welfare of their teams generally. So we did see a mass exodus from our beloved hospitality industry of really skilled workers who didn't feel treated very well. So actually, as we do re-engage them, as leaders in that space, we need to double down on the value proposition we're trying to offer to make it a compelling place to come and work. So having a solution around this massive 62% gap to training resource that's being shown is a good answer to have. Having a financial wellness platform of earned wage access in a secure way, good answer. Having good communication planned out, good answer. But it all stems, I think, to my mind, from how do we want to engage and work with our team and what's important in that value.
Well, I touched on a number of times today, this whole thing about learning, learning. People want to learn, they just want to learn. And as you say, that's just been forgotten about somewhat in that respect. So this is kind of really filling that gap nicely. So so let's go on to our next question, Nicola. So let's talk more about sort of your managers and C-suite leaders. So I guess, what do they now expect kind of HR workforce management tech to deliver to your business? What do you say? I guess analytic tools, data-driven decisions. What sort of things are they expecting, do you feel?
Yeah, it's definitely an improvement on the retention side of things, ultimately, in terms of our casual workforce. But they are now starting to see data coming through, which, we're still learning around. There are different reporting elements and requesting reporting elements, to see what is possible to get out of the system. So again, quite early on our journey on this side of things, but already we're looking very closely at event by event forecasting and payroll costing. and more importantly at the moment, that split between that direct labour and that agency labour side of things. That's the immediate focus currently. But as we start to understand more of the reporting tools that come from that, and also create some new reports that's specific for our business and what we're looking to drive, that there'll certainly be more emphasis on that as it grows.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken data, for quite some years, and really, I certainly feel HR and people leaders kind of get it now, and it's kind of, so, back onto that then, Nathan, really exciting times, really, and we talked a little bit about predictive data and tracking. So tell us a little bit again, what really is the ability, I guess, to get at real-time data, the importance of that?
Yeah, as I said, data, if it's in the system, we can extract it, and it's about choosing your meaningful dashboards. But let's come back to that real life benefit to the organization outside of the individuals and the engagement and the communication, the data piece. I previous to HumanForce ran a people related business right the way up until just pre-pandemic actually. And I was always interested in the retention, because I'd invested so much time recruiting and grabbing hold of that worker who was going to work flexibly. I really didn't want them to go. And candidly, organisations, not Nicola's, but others in that space, the margins are so tight that if they didn't stay with me for a period of time, I was losing money in my recruitment process. And the number I used to work to was £184 per person to get them found, recruited, onboarded, trained, and out to their first shift. So that was a key number for me, and I wanted to keep them. So if I was looking at the HumanForce data, one of the things I'd be looking at is my resource pool of people that aren't accepting shifts and why. And then I'd reach out and communicate to them, because we've done all the hard work of having them, onboarding them, potentially training them, working with them for some time, and then they've got a life change that means they're not taking any work with us. They're a great asset that we've already invested so much time in. I'd want to communicate with those people first. And then if you can add to that data, when's the best time to get shifts accepted? What's the pool resource that's really available? You start to be able to make early decisions around your agency labour requirements. And if we can seamlessly output the data to the third party provider, again, it's helping Nicola and the team really put on those life events that they want their customers to come to, but the experience their customers have is delivered by that lovely, wonderful team of people. So if they can get what they need to turn up happy and ready to work, and the data helps the business do that, you get a great result all around.
It's all about, like we say all the time, no point in having data for data's sake, but if you work out what the challenges are of the business and what you need to fix, then you can ask for that, you can find it, and then you can deal with it. So let's move on quickly, because time's pressing on. Or try and deal with it, let's put it that way. Our next poll, so have a look at this one as it pops up on your screen. Have you previously struggled with the change management associated with tech rollout? So this one will pop out in a moment. Nathan, what do you think on this one?
I think I currently struggle with change management associated with tech rollouts. Anything we can do to improve it and get people to do a change management process would be a massive help. So I expect most people struggle with this in one way or another.
Nicola, was that a struggle? Has that been a struggle?
I think that the answer here would largely be yes, I would imagine. I think with regards to any tech rollouts, I think the implementation and the planning side of things is often underestimated. And I can speak from experience coming into this, that decision having already been made pre me joining. So yeah, I'll be interested to see, but I would imagine that most people would say yes.
And correct, 100% yes. So no surprises there. And I think we'll come on to a little bit about that actually, just at the end actually. So good. All right, Nathan, just a couple of core questions just to go. 10 minutes to go. So so what sort of things can be automated with some of the tech being talked about? So I know we touched on some of this already, but just give us a quick overview of key areas.
Yeah, so I think we did mention most of them, but we'll just rattle through those really.
Yeah.
The rules around people's contract types, the templating of the roster format. So if Nicola has an event that happened at one venue this year on February the 12th, and it's likely to happen next year, they can keep that template so they've got that real base roster to start from for next year, saving time. The template for a roster that then they can ship offer to, the shift bidding process, the capture of data for onboarding. Pretty much all of those aspects can have an element of automation that reduces the time required to manage building those events. And it's most prolific in those larger scale, reasonably sized workforce where you've got a lot of manual admin that would otherwise need to take place.
Yep. Okay, good. Yep. And that's just a bit. And Nicola, again, we've touched on it, but any just clear examples where you've used that technology to automate processes and kind of that impact that you've seen?
Yeah, so around the automation, it's mostly around the clocking in, clocking out process, which is really slick. The same with the link to the payroll piece, which is really slick, removing that element of human error around that, and also the instant comms and shift bidding side of things. What I would say in terms of other automation pieces of technology is that HumanForce are, I suppose, one of our first key milestones as part of a much wider tech journey that we're going on. And HumanForce have been brilliant in terms of supporting us and really being accommodating on different partners that we're looking to work with, and actually compatibility with a lot of different systems is also a huge benefit. So we're soon to be moving towards Workday as a HR system, which will bring about even more automation in some of the activities that we do. So, you know, coming back to that change piece, what we're going through now with HumanForce and that coaching, that guidance will certainly be synonymous with the journeys that we're going through with other systems. So we can learn a lot from this to help and benefit others as we move forward.
Any questions? Don't forget, any questions. If I've not covered anything you would like to ask, please pop them on the Q&A and I will ask them. Right, so this is our final question actually. So Nicola, we alluded just a little bit to it just off the back of the poll there. But so yeah, can you share how you implemented the tech you have to date, how you monitor its use, and importantly, I guess the take-up, because the take-up's a key point here, and I guess some of the challenges you may have had and things you may have done differently. So give us an overview.
Yeah, I think for me coming into the business and understanding that we'd already made the decision to partner with HumanForce, I can understand automatically the benefits that such a system can provide. But quite often when those decisions are being made, it's quite easy to have IT in the room. It's very easy to have your C-suite decision makers in the room. But quite often we forget about the people element, because ultimately, not only supporting the casual workforce in adopting and understanding this technology, but there's a huge support, guidance, coaching piece that we need to do to our existing workforce that is actually driving this change and supporting this change. And quite often you can miss out on having the operators in the room for them to understand actually how this can translate into reality. So I would lie if I say it's been a very smooth journey for us internally. It hasn't. We're now in a place where we have a really good project team that's supporting all of our different venue rollouts, and that's a project team per venue, supported by a central team, which includes myself. We've got someone from IT, from operations, and from a project management perspective as well. So we have weekly calls to track progress on where we're up to. If there's any hurdles or hiccups or anything that we need to address quickly, we can do so. And that's proved absolutely vital. The support that we've got from HumanForce in driving that has been phenomenal. But it's took us a while to get there. Whereas now we're on our third venue that's soon to be launching. It's our smoothest rollout so far. So we've definitely learned something from the previous two implementations. And that will act as a bit of a blueprint, really, for future rollouts. We now have a tried and tested method that's worked well. We understand where the pitfalls are, where perhaps we've missed our opportunity in getting that early engagement with our casuals in downloading the app, but also our management and operational teams, they also have access to a mobile app. They can check if they're at the other side of a building, whether the team that they've scheduled have actually clocked in or not. And if not, they can instantly communicate with them via that mobile app. And that's technology at a touch point that you wouldn't ordinarily have, which can really help operationally to divert resource if you need to at any given moment in time. So yeah, not been smooth, but we've learned a lot. We've gone through you know, some hiccups and bumps in the road, which you would expect with any tech implementation, but I think we're in a really, really good place now and have key people from the key areas that can really help to drive this and adopt this.
Yeah, and I guess, as you say, any tech rollout is new, so it's going to take some time to fine tune. Nathan, your support there, I guess, is important.
Well, I think Nicola makes a really good point, and actually has said quite quickly, because it's relevant to them, but to those listening, it's vital. The right project stakeholders in this project needs to be allocated and defined. And if anyone leaves the organisation from one of those project roles, there needs to be a handover and a transfer process, because as the implementing organisation, that supplier partner of technology, we have multi-location implementations like Nicola's that can take many months. We've got some that I'm in the middle of that are many tens of locations that is going to have taken years because of that rollout phasing. And we've got some that can be much shorter in days and weeks, depending on the complexity. But they're always better when you've got key points of contact, you've got owners within the organisation, and it isn't the C-suite, as Nicola quite rightly points out, because quite often they've signed it off and they want to then see you at the end when it's done. And it's those operators is where it lives and dies with adoption. And a really great bit of advice to people implementing is just be aware of your own internal team turnover. If you've got a key operator at venue who leaves the organisation, flag that as an orange area that needs to be revisited for retraining and re-implementation, because otherwise what will happen, or what we see happen, is the creep in of a move away from standard operating practice, or someone who hasn't necessarily been taught the most efficient way to utilise the solution, and you risk just some slight adjustment to adoption. Because for me, it's all about setting the success metrics, driving good comms, and driving adoption. That's a good implementation.
Just to conclude then, so we've nearly run out of time. Any questions, please do ask them now, because we're just going to finish up soon. Or by all means, just email us in and we'll get them through. But any questions, just finalise off. So just finish up then, really, with just some top tips, really, which I guess you covered a little bit there, Nathan. But just top tips for implementing tech and ensuring it gets used, isn't it? Making sure it gets used. Adoption, as you say, is key. So give us, well, both of you actually, a couple of top tips.
I think it's so important that we'll say adoption again, but get your stakeholder team identified, the people who are your champions, and think about the change curve. The champions have to be brought on board in order to champion your very process and define it. Do the definitions of what you're trying to achieve. Those would be my 2 tips.
I think timing is crucial. So may not necessarily be relevant to all industries, but I touched upon it earlier in that we have different peaks and troughs in different areas of our business, and timing is absolutely crucial. You know, for us to launch in one of our busiest periods for a particular venue, dependent upon their event calendar, has its pros and cons. Whilst on the one hand, you can go through the training, the onboarding, and actually they can use it in real life quickly, is a benefit, but at the same time, there's a limit to what people can do when they've got a day job as well as trying to implement and support the implementation of a new system. So I'd say timing is absolutely critical. Make sure that the team that you've got working on this, whether it's operational or central, and don't lose that disconnect, because it's very easy to lose sight of that. Make sure that they have the time to commit to be able to making sure this is a success, because there is nothing harder than launching something 50% and trying to get it 100%. You've got to try and get it right first time, and everyone needs to be understanding of that.
Yeah, I think, again, real life experiences there, Nicola. Thank you for those. It's really powerful, really useful for our audience to know. Right, well, that's really it. So listen, we hope we provided you some key learning, insight, best practice and methodology to help you create a richer employee experience for your deskless workers. and really just to find those significant productivity gains for your organization. My thanks to our panel today, Nicola and Nathan, for your wonderful insights and knowledge, so thank you both, and also HumanForce for partnering with us. There will be a recording at the end of this, so we'll put that together and send it to all of you who registered. Thank you all for watching, thank you for taking part in the polls, and do join us in the future. Right, thank you, Nicola, thank you, Nathan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both, appreciate it.
Bye for now.